Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Fortum. I'm the host of this podcast, Doers Within Emerging Markets. And I just want to share my experience with using Anchor so far. When the pandemic started, I thought about starting a podcast, and the whole idea was to bring in some really amazing folks that are doing some great work in their respective industries within the emerging markets. And the Anchor platform really helped me get the word out there and also just make it a lot easier for me to invite the guest and just share the amazing experiences they've had and the amazing work they're doing in their respective industries within the emerging markets. Um, it's pretty fun. You don't even worry about the technical part of making a podcast. You actually just focus more on the content. And Anchor has done it really well for me. So I will highly encourage anybody who is trying to start a podcast to try to use. Just check out Anchor, and I think you won't regret it. I'm not a technical person, but if you listen to these episodes that I've been publishing so far, it seems like I know what the technical part of it, but Anchor helps you take care of the technical part, and you just focus on the content. So feel free to check it out. I highly encourage you. Won't regret it, and it's right there. You don't pay anything. So in times like this, I think starting a podcast and getting the word out there, irrespective of what you're doing, will be a really great experience. So thank you guys for listening to my episodes. Please check out Anchor, and you will have a great time. So cheers, guys, and see you guys next episode. Thanks.
Hello.
Hello, Jacob. How are you? Mic check, mic check. All right. Are
It's good.
we live?
We are live.
All right. Awesome.
Um,
Awesome.
yes. I think last time we talked about your research, so I think it was very insightful, and I actually learned a lot. So I'm looking forward to the reverse this time around.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here. Excited again. This is another first for me. My first time hosting a podcast. So I'm really excited. I'm also really fortunate to have to host my very good friend, Jacob Fortune, who I met through Babson's. 1 second. I need to close my window because
It's all good.
the trains in the background.
It's all good. That's part of the process.
All right, awesome. Okay, all set. The studio is ready. We've soundproofed the studio, so I think we're ready to go.
That's good.
All
I'm
right.
excited, man.
So thank you, Jacob, for joining me today as I host today's episode of the podcast. And today we're going to be learning about you, your experiences, professional experiences, but also some of your travel experiences, and the things that you've done and encountered to bring you to this point that you are in your life. And so I think it's fair to start by introducing ourselves. My name is Kevin Richardson. I'm a graduate student at Babson, and you are.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Kevin. So yes, I good friends with Kevin, and I also at the Masters of Science in Finance uh, student at Babson College as well. So really excited to be here and interested in emerging markets, interested in a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors, investment opportunities. So so excited to be being interviewed in this episode, and I'm looking forward to your questions, Kevin.
Awesome. So, Jacob, tell us. Why don't you start by telling us how you became involved? So, Jacob's an entrepreneur, and he started a few and been involved in multiple ventures. Interestingly, not only in the US but also across the African continent and in Asia. How about you tell us how you give us some background to who you are and how you became involved in entrepreneurship?
Oh, definitely. And yeah, so I think, I mean, so just to be very honest and vulnerable, like most of the endeavors I started, hasn't really worked out well. I think it's it's just, I just want to put it out there for
Don't be
people to
modest,
know.
Jacob.
For to give people, because I think one of the things that when you say someone's an entrepreneur, or you have done something, it by some measure there has been a learning curve, and there's still that learning process you're going through. So I just wanted to say that, just wanted to put it out there first. But just to answer your question, so I actually never really saw myself as an entrepreneur or do anything related to business or finance or anything within that realm. I think it was by circumstance, but also by um, um, I had to put myself in a situation where I had to do something. So I will just give some context behind that. So I came to the United States, about 11 years ago, and at that time I just left my home country, Cameroon, and back in Cameroon, I was exposed a lot exposed a lot to the healthcare system. So my dad is a physician and my mom is a pharmacist. And, the kind of what I saw as the ideal job was being a physician or a pharmacist. And I grew up in an era where, unfortunately, HIV/AIDS was like a big pandemic or epidemic, sorry, in Cameroon. And my dad actually treated some of these patients, and it was something that I saw firsthand. So, growing up, and I saw that not only do you provide the opportunities for people to live better lives, but also the opportunity to heal a nation, right? So, fast forward, about 10 years into kind of my formative years, about 17, 18, found myself in Wisconsin. And, I had enrolled into this very kind of a basketball school. It's called Marquette. Dwayne Wade went there, Jimmy Butler was my classmate. Um, so it was like,
Wait,
very,
did you say Jimmy Butler was your classmate?
yes, Jimmy
How
Butler was my classmate.
how
Yeah.
cool is that?
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, at that time, we didn't see him as one of the ideal, he was not averaging, I think he was averaging like 7 points a game. I mean, when sophomore year, I think it was junior year where he actually averaged like 12. Then he went up to like 17 senior year. Then, it was fascinating to see that, to see Jimmy Butler from what he was as a college basketball player and to now what he is. He's one of the greats in this era, I guess.
Absolutely, no question about that.
So, but I mean, we can talk about basketball. It's a whole episode. One of us has foundation, but it was very cool, and this was Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I decided to major in biology because I felt that was a very great foundation to learn the basics, the essentials, or the core classes that we needed to apply for medical school.
Right.
So, I did my undergrad degree. I found myself leaning towards research. So I finished the degree 2012. I started doing some research at Medical College of Wisconsin. And thereafter, I applied for this program at the National Institute of Health in DC. This was 2013, 2014. And the program was geared towards minority students who are trying to build a career in research, but also in, medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So that led me to NIH. I did some really cool stuff there with National Human Genome Research Institute, working on, this might get very scientific, but we actually did human genome sequencing, not on humans, but we worked with this fish called zebrafish. And there is this very good savvy technology that was being was kind of the hot thing at that time. It's called CRISPR-Cas9. So we knock out genes and see whether it has effect on the fish and stuff like that to address some problems in humans. Like, these are genes that are analogous to zebrafish from humans, and we knock it out to see if that gene was responsible for that disease. But I did that for like a year and a half. Then I found myself in Boston, on Longwood area, because I've garnered some experience in research. I did apply for one job at the T.H. Chan School of Public Health.
That's the one at Harvard, is that correct?
Yes. So what a great experience. I thought, at that time, legitimately feel like I've arrived working at a school like that. It was quite the experience. I did some work there with TB, tuberculosis, and the goal was to come up with the vaccine, a more highly potent vaccine, because the BCG I think you know about the BCG.
Yes.
The efficacy rate was still very, was still hanging around 40 to maybe 60%. But the goal was to come up with a vaccine that could actually help even treat patients that are immunocompromised, like HIV patients. So something that's much more potent. So that was a very cool experience. But during that time, I reconnected with a childhood friend, who at that time was going to MIT, and he was doing his degree in electrical and computer science. I think they call it course 6.2. And he invited me to this hackathon. So hackathon is like a bunch of random, people, you have different backgrounds, business, engineering, psychology, and it's just a range of backgrounds come together for like 48 hours and solve a challenge that is being posed by the organizers of the hackathon. It can be very tech, sometimes it's very business, or sometimes it can be in between. So I did attend one of that. It was just like pretty cool and just amazing. And I saw that this is an interesting space. So that was like my introduction. And this friend of mine is actually now in California working at Oracle, but he kind of gave me that exposure. And I think the turning point was actually when I attended a conference. It was an international development conference at the Harvard Kennedy School. This was in 2015. And I met this guy. I'm sure you know him. His name is Sango Dell. And at that time, he was a student at the Harvard Law School as well as the Harvard Business School. And he gave a very, very good speech about why young people need to get involved in providing change in Africa from an entrepreneurial lens, right? And I think seeing someone that young, but also that confident and ambitious to make a difference on the continent, which is primarily being led by people like older folks, was just very intriguing, but also very inspiring. So that was actually when I realized that, maybe doing something in the entrepreneurial space would provide a lot of opportunities, not just for myself, but for people. And having that naivete, like just not knowing all the facts by itself might be a great way to actually create solutions, because, you don't limit yourself to what might go wrong or the risk that, which I think you should still consider. But it was just a great way to see that, working in this lab, you solve one problem, but being an entrepreneur, you can actually build systems that will actually help different types of people from different backgrounds and cultures, but also different professions to actually address the systemic problems that I thought Africa would be in the best position to benefit from. So, I mean, a lot of other things happened, but, those were the kind of the formative exposures that led me to apply to business school in 2017. And my thesis at that time was like, after being exposed and doing some startups with Kwate Ebenezer, who is a friend of mine in California, I kind of led the personal statement that I wrote was how I want to learn the skills that Babson, which is kind of known for its entrepreneurship program, I want to learn the skills of operations, strategy, team management that I can use to build systems and platforms in Africa that will provide room for even the unskilled people to have jobs that they can employ themselves, but also kind of transform their communities. So it took a span of like 5 years to get me to a point where I realized that maybe this was a very good space to impact change from a systemic level that I think most African countries, Cameroon for one, and some other African countries might really need or will be willing to have someone with those skill sets to create some of these programs that will empower the youth, create jobs, and also provide some opportunities for cross collaboration and partnerships that will be critical to the economic growth of these countries.
Wow. I mean, it's incredibly amazing, how much exposure you've had over the years. And I've known you for a little while now, but just this, the more I hear from you, the more I hear about you, the more I realize you've done and experienced and encountered that, this continues to blow my mind. I mean, if I think about your experiences starting from a biology program in college through your experience with the NIH and through your work experience with the lab at Harvard, and then transitioning into business, I am just highly fascinated about how much you've done in these past years. I'm also really excited to hear that you have been inspired by some of the people that are making real impact on the continent, like Sandra Dele, whom you mentioned. So that's remarkable. I was going to ask you, but you already touched on some of the resources that you leverage. And for me, I would say that what I pick up from that is you really leveraged your relationships and networks with the people that had gone ahead of you in business or in other fields, and really took the time to learn from them or just listen to what they had to say about their journey. And so this is our chance as listeners, and also for me as a host and your friend, to also learn from your journey. So I'm going to be asking you some questions about your journey, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, so I'm actually pumped for this. And we'll get to your travels because I know you're a well-traveled man. But
okay.
but before I get to that, I wanted to give you the opportunity to share about what kinds of ways that you would like to make change. Like, what's your thought process when you think about making change, providing jobs for people? And I was very impressed hearing you say entrepreneurship not only empowers you to grow in your career, but also empowers you to empower other people on the continent by providing jobs, providing a source of livelihood, and allowing other people to live out their dreams as you empower them. Is that a fair characterization? I think that's something I feel you're passionate about just hearing you speak. But what are some of the ways that you hope to be able to provide these opportunities?
No, definitely. Yeah, that's very fair assessment. But also, I think that's a very, very good question as well. Just as a preface, I think whatever comments I provide is based on my experience, and I do hope that it can translate to our listeners. At the same time, it's a one point on the big graph, right? So I just want to take that preface and a precaution. So there are many ways I think people can create change, but based on what I've observed and I've been exposed to, I would say, and this has developed over time. I think primarily I thought that, provide an impact, which is I kind of mentioned earlier, is broad, like empowering people, but it's how do you empower people? And I've come to realize that I think one is providing, like making sure that you give people the respect and just the trust that that they can do it by themselves. And there's a lot of caveats to this. So I mean, most of the time, and maybe I will just kind of dive a little bit into my experience in Uganda when I was working with some local entrepreneurs, which you can expand further in this episode. But part of it was that, you come from the US, you're in the MBA program at Babson College, considered one of the best entrepreneurship. And you go there and you have great intentions. You want to build their businesses, and you want to bring in what you have learned in class, like building a better balance sheet, providing a better accounting system, and kind of helping them strategize. And within the almost a month or 2 months that I was there, kind of what I saw every week was that even though they didn't have some of the knowledge and the skill sets that I have been fortunate to be exposed to, and read many HBS, Harvard Business School case studies that gave me an opportunity to think about how companies address situations. The most important thing that I realized, to some degree towards the end, which was kind of unfortunate, was that I had to be able to listen to what they thought about the problem, but also what were the local ideas and approaches that they had been implementing or they could implement, and I just had to add or build on that. And I think it was something that, it takes time, because sometimes, I went there, I didn't know most of the people. I just read the biographies and, we've had some Skype conversations. But I think there's this uncertainty that you have to just be willing to accept, at the same time with some level of just like this unrealistic trust, that you just have to say, okay, you know what, I'll just listen to what they have to say. I'll look at the projects that they've been working on, or the solutions that I'll come up with, and try to navigate around that, or even and from there actually co-create a solution. But I think the key point is that they should be at the forefront of actually applying that solution.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 5 years now, no, sorry, 3 years now from that time I went to Uganda, they are the ones in Uganda, and they're the ones doing the project. I'm here,
Right.
And provided that you had empowered them, 100%, and say, hey, this is your project, this is for you, this is for your community.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, just from the first conversation, this doesn't have to be in the middle of the conversation or the middle of the project. It's like, has to be at the beginning. And I think that's a very good way to actually address, to your question, create change. Because if you don't make people confident or trust you, that you trust them, it's really hard to do whatever you're trying to do in the beginning. So I think change is more about the change that I think that will be very long-term and systemic, is to realize that people have the capacity to think for themselves, even it might not be the right way, but to give them that opportunity to express themselves, and also to kind of pull out some of the solutions that they have, and you can actually just kind of build on that, or actually readdress it or reassess it with them. And I think that in that way, you create very long-term relationships, because it's all about human connections first before any projects that you might have in mind.
Right. So for the benefit of our listeners, can you, I'd like for you to be able to talk about, how you ended up in Uganda, why Uganda, and what your vision for going into Uganda was. What kinds of projects did you envision being engaged in versus what you actually did when you were on the ground? Who were you interacting with, and what were some of the goals of these projects? So why did you go to Uganda? What did you end up doing in Uganda? And in hindsight, what are your reflections on that experience?
Most definitely. I think that's a very good way to go into kind of next phase of the question. So Uganda came up at this point in time, I'd done one semester at Babson College, like in my MBA program, and I met this and also at that time I was working for this company. It was part-time. It was called Bridge for Billions. And basically Bridge for Billions is an online incubator. So you can go in there, you can actually have a 3 to 6 months incubation period where you actually get connected to a mentor. And any person around the world can apply for this program, like $30 a month. And you get like this online training with as well as being paired with a mentor based on what you're trying to build from around the world. So I was working as a salesperson, and I ended up in this event that was being hosted at Microsoft down here, right here in Cambridge. And one of the people that was there was this lady from Haiti, or she's originally from Haiti, but she's Haitian American.
Okay.
And she was from Babson College. So, being that's one of the sponsors of Bishop Bill, and she was also a sponsor from Babson College. She we just had that conversation because she said she's from Babson. I said, hey, I'm an MBA student from Babson College, and it's great to see someone from Babson here. And we just struck a very interesting conversation. And she brought up this fellowship program in Uganda, where they're looking for someone with a business school student who can help build some of these healthcare startups from a marketing standpoint or from just a pure strategy perspective. But the main goal was to kind of build on some of the existing projects that they're working on in Uganda.
Right.
So what happened was that Babson College at that time partnered with MGH, Massachusetts General Hospital. And within MGH, there is this healthcare incubator that has a headquarters in Mbarara, Uganda, which is like south of Uganda. And about a year ago, they had started this hackathon.
Mm-hmm.
And through this hackathon, some startups came out of it. And a year later, these startups had grown to a point where they needed someone with some management experience to build on what they had started, right? So there were a couple of projects I had to work on. And actually, when I went there, there were more projects because what had happened was that it had become more like a co-working space, where students from Barara University of Science and Technology come in there to work together, but also to develop the ideas. But so before I left Boston to Uganda, so what happened was that I applied for this fellowship, and a month later I actually got it. And the premise of the fellowship, which was called the Innovation Leadership Fellowship, was to actually work with these companies to help expand their products to greater Uganda, to develop a very long-term marketing strategy that will be able to penetrate different sectors of the market. It's a very kind of a segregated system. And third, come up with a very solid strategy on how they can adjust the price that is affordable for the greater masses, because most of these products are healthcare related products, and the low income market has the greater size. So that was the premise of it. There were 3 companies at the time. There was Sunny Drop, which is a hand sanitizer, and there was Prism, which stands for promoting remote infants using SMS. So it's like a mobile app. And the last one was called iDress. iDress is like a local wound dresser that uses local products that has been certified to heal wounds. So these were all healthcare products. So before I left, that was what I had in mind. And I was connected with some really good, really experienced Ugandans on the ground who have been working with these entrepreneurs since when they had the styles had been developed. Right. So on the Boston side, you had MGH physicians and nurses that had known these entrepreneurs that worked with them, such as Dr. Chris Olson, which at this time actually he came up with this COVID-19 testing kit that nurses can test patients without having a face-to-face contact. It's like a boot, right, which he just developed, which is pretty cool. But
so is that's in use in Uganda now, or is that
at MGH?
It's at MGH. Okay.
Yes. And he came up with that. It was pretty cool. And they're still using it up to now. But
that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Dr. Chris Olson is amazing. And he's well connected in that space in Uganda as well as here in the US in terms of healthcare startups. So with Chris Olson, connected me to Data Satorino, who is the head of the incubator at Uganda. So when I went to Uganda, I worked with Dr. Data, Nuret Nyambogo, and Martin. Kind of Martin's last name is kind of escaping my mind. But Martin was really cool as well. So these three people, Nuret, Martin, and Dr. Data, who is a pediatrician, were the key points of contact and the leaders of the incubator, and they were also well connected with the startups as well. So yeah, that was how I got there. I mean, I got there, I met them, and we started, building the plans and on how to interact with these startups and to work with them to achieve these deliverables that I had to deliver 2 months later.
That's incredible. What would you say are some of your favorite memories from your time in Uganda?
Yes, I think one was just the peace of mind in terms of like you get up in the morning and you don't think about anything. I mean, I had to go to work. I had to go to work, but he's just like, I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this. There's just this sense of like there's no rush. You don't have to. It's like I feel like in the US, before I left, I felt like something is chasing me, and I have to do this.
Your rent is chasing you. No,
Exactly.
just joking.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, like, you just like things are slow paced. Sometimes they were not ideal conditions to get things done, but at the same time, I think life was spaced out in a way that you can actually appreciate every single event or activity that you did. And I mean, that was just one thing I just realized, like getting there. The thing was just like the people, they were very, they really cared about you, and they really wanted you to have a good experience. Martin, like, treated me like a younger brother when I got there. He wanted to really make sure that I had a really good time. So the people were just like they're really like, caring, and they made sure you had a great time there. And that was something that I really appreciate, the interactions I had with the leaders of the incubator, but as well as the entrepreneurs, just how kind of they had this enormous grit, like they really wanted to make things happen, and also it's not bad, but and also they were very positive. I mean, you could tell like there's so many limitations. Like one is like they have to really figure out their product market fit. There's so many things they have to address, but at the same time they will come every day trying to make this work, and that was very inspiring, especially at times when the internet goes off, lights go off, but you just seen how passionate they were and how committed they were to the startups. I think that was something that kept you moving. I mean, and that's one of the reasons why I actually decided to love the entrepreneurial ecosystem in that country and to do stuff there beyond the fellowship program.
A lot of things for me to learn, and hopefully for our listeners to learn from your experience. And I really appreciate you bringing up that even though it was, life was slow paced, one of the things you enjoyed was not feeling the pressure of being chased, because sometimes I think that's easy, especially for young professionals, to believe that you always have, the way to always be successful is to necessarily be chasing it. But sometimes, what are you really chasing at the end of the day is a good question to pause and think about. And sometimes pausing and just enjoying the journey, the process, can also be good. So I like that was one of the things you enjoyed, or was one of the favorite things from being in Uganda. But I was hoping, I wanted to ask, did you have any challenges working with entrepreneurs on the ground? Because you were on the ground as well. And so did you have any, were there any things or experiences that you wish could have been better? And if there were, would you mind sharing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, first of all, I think your questions have been great so far.
Well, side note to the listeners, Jacob and I no, I'm just kidding.
No, seriously, initially you're like, no, this is my first time, but it sounds like I've been doing this behind the scenes. You have to come up with full disclosure here. We need the
No,
papers.
no, no.
Yeah, to show the papers. So yeah, I think challenges were actually, I mean, there was a point where I just wanted to come back to the US, and I'm just being honest. I think um, one was, I mean, there were several, but I think one thing that was kind of um, I had to really come to grips with. And I mean, before I got there, I had this mindset like, let's get things done. And it took me a while. So I know one of the things I mentioned I really liked about it was like the slow pace. But when you just come from the United States and you want to, and you're sent on a mission and you're being paid because MJ is paying me for this. So I really wanted to deliver. So when I got there and I was like, let's get things done, they were like, no. The first of all, like, when I got interesting, the first time I went, my first day, I got there and like the first person arrived like around like 10 a.m. I mean, it's like we should be that 8, and I know no Martin, I love you guys, Nuret, I love you guys, but then I was like, I really want to, and the first meeting, which I think like one of the leaders in the incubator kind of laid out the companies and what they're doing and stuff, which was really interesting. And I just like, okay, I had made these sheets, expert spreadsheets and stuff. So start putting in the data. And they're like, you know what? We should just chill and we need to go get lunch. And I've not done anything yet.
They just got there.
We just got there, And I mean, once they arrived, they actually made some tea, and making the tea took some time, So we had some tea, and I think it was mamusa. Mamusa is like dough.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, So we had some
That's
of
really
them.
I'd say I don't know about you, Jacob, but I'd say that's really hospitable of them. I don't know.
They were really. I mean, it's just like I had this pressure at the back of my mind, like I really need to deliver. I mean, I've been sent by these doctors and nurses. I had this I just had this pressure on myself that the earlier I start this and if I said this in a way that on the first day that no, this is action based and I need to get the data and I need to get people committed to the work, then that will have a ripple effect downstream. So that was the intention I had in mind. Mm-hmm. At the same time, these people, they have their own way of life, cultures, and I had to adapt to them rather than them adapting to me.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, kind of the challenge, I mean, with time, I know back and forth, you always have like, oh yeah, I need to just chill and like, kind of go with the pace. But at the same time, it was like, I need to get things done. Right. And that was something that I mean, to some degree, I always wanted to get more data. I wanted to make sure that people are just committed to the time that they said we have to meet. People can deliver certain milestones at the times that we had discussed, right? So that was like something that I had to really get to their pace in order to get things done, or even to just get something done. I mean, that was something that you could tell. I mean, even to now, when I still work with some of the entrepreneurs down there, is how do you manage the expectations of time from their point of view, and how fast or how slow they have to deliver something. And one other thing was just, I saw, I'm from West Africa, that East Africa. I mean, it's not the same. I had expectations of what Africans are.
Right.
But I think, when you travel across, when you travel to another country, especially when it's not in the same area, there are certain things that are just different. I mean, the food is different.
Yes.
The food is different. And, so I was like, I want African food, and they gave me matoke. So matoke is like mashed bananas.
Okay.
And it's different. It's not the same like in West Africa.
Right.
It's different. And so, I mean, just like what you think of being African is challenged as well.
That's pretty interesting perspective, I will say. And I haven't had the chance to visit. I'm West African as well, for those who may not know. but I haven't had the chance to visit other parts of other sub regions, and so I appreciate you sharing that perspective. But I mean, as we keep drumming every single day, Africa is not a country at all, and the continent is really, really filled with many diverse flavors. Not just from a food perspective, but just culturally. Um, the people of Africa differ in many different ways. So that's a lot of that is to be expected. But I think it's also cool that and interesting that when you encounter the different parts of Africa like you did, that somehow you're taken aback, like you're surprised by it. I also think you made some very salient points. One of the things I wanted to point out really briefly was, you know, one I thought it was interesting that you had to adjust going back to Africa. You felt like you had to, and going back to Uganda, but I say Africa to mean home. You
Yeah.
felt like you needed to make adjustments to be more like them, which kind of
Yeah.
sounds like you had become more American in a way, which makes sense, owing to your education and your professional experiences from your adult life. And so that's to be expected. But I think it's interesting that, or should I say, it's ironic in a way
Mhm.
that you had to adjust. Which brings me to the point I actually want to make. When a lot of times when you have investors from the developed, the West, go into
Yeah.
African countries, it seems to be that just from other people I've had conversations with, the expectations are not the same. And I think I I would say it's fair that that was kind of your experience, that the expectations that you had going in were not necessarily on par with the expectations the folks on the ground, the actual entrepreneurs, had.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a gap there.
Yeah.
And some of the challenges you experience highlight that, for example, with time management and meeting milestones.
Yeah.
Can you share some insight on, some thoughts you may have on bridging some of that gap? Another thing I know you mentioned was just the availability of timely information, for instance, and how did that impact your work, and what are some of the thoughts you may have on bridging some of those gaps, so that yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, great question, Kevin. That's really, really, really. I mean, at some point we have to address this because I think um, to actually mitigate this challenge, but also like close this gap, is very critical on how it's very critical on how we move forward in actually using the tool of entrepreneurship and investment as a medium or media for creating a long term change. I think one thing I would say, and I think, I mean, we've probably had this conversation on the side, is we are actually in the best position to close this gap because, I mean, even though I had these challenges that I was trying to kind of meet their expectations, I had been exposed to this type of culture in my younger years. So it was not just about I don't connect. It's just like because of the gap that I had in the US, I had formed a different personality of myself
Mhm.
that being confronted with my older self or what I've been exposed to when I was younger is a little bit of a discomfort.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I as I will say, I was in between both worlds, and I think it's the ideal space to be in if you want to be the person that uh, kind of promotes long-term change. And I'll say that based on of what I think is the right way to move forward. So one side is that locals have to create the change, but some of the tools, but also like just a mindset has to be um, brought in from outside. Not to say what they have in there is completely wrong. It's just for them to actually get something done that is very systemic or long term, they have to shift. They'll have to do a little bit of shifting of the mindset, which in most cases has to come from outside. but it doesn't have to be 100% from what people from the outside think on how a project has to be implemented. Because at the end of the day, it's still
It's
a
for
different
them over
ecosystem.
there. It's right.
It's definitely, Kevin, definitely. So I, at some point, and I think there's something that is still a process. I think it's better that we are in this position because we actually see both sides of both walls, and we can be a very good catalyst on channeling local growth, but also bringing in the kind of resources that can be very valuable for them to scale up whatever they're trying to build. So I think in my case, and I'm not saying you have to be an African in diaspora to be the person to make this happen. I would just say if you really want to be you want to be someone that can actually build on something on the local level into something that can grow into like a national level in a country in Africa, you have to be willing to like either bring people on board that understand the local environment, but also willing to connect with people from the outside and be able to differentiate. Like, okay, this is just a different perspective, but the people on the ground still have the upper hand in terms of implemented projects along long term. So as an investor, and I know the different most of these foreign FDI, foreign direct investments that come in, and some of them might have not been exposed to Africa. It's a little bit challenging for them to actually communicate effectively what they expect, and for the entrepreneurs on the ground to really understand what their expectations are. So, one way to address this problem is like have people that have had experience on both walls, in both walls, and not just like, because I still need more experience or more exposure, because I was back there just for a couple of months, but someone who legitimately has been on the ground, but also someone that has been exposed to the financial and the entrepreneur ecosystem in Africa to understand how their tone is, what their language is, what their expectations are, what they understand by milestones, and to be able to navigate both worlds very clearly.
Right.
I think these individuals have the capability to actually bridge both worlds and create that communication that's needed. But I'll say like the upper hand has to be given to people on the ground, because that's where the project happens. And there has to be some mutual respect. I think I started the podcast by saying mutual respect is key for long-term growth.
Yeah.
It's just like, if you don't respect the people that are actually doing the work, and I'm just saying just upfront rude. I'm just saying like, just value the ideas, value the way they think, value the project that I've already had, and build on that. I think it's very critical to initiate the conversation to begin with, and hopefully that can start building the bridge to creating this mutually beneficial projects in add-on with the financing. That will be key for their success.
Those are some very valuable points. I hope our listeners were taking notes. For me, the notes I've taken are, one, and probably most important, there has to be mutual respect for the visionaries, the folks running with the ideas, birthing and running with the ideas. Those are the entrepreneurs. And even though there may be frustrations from all parties, respect will allow a coalition to address the challenge really, and not the people. And then with mutual respect comes mutual understanding. Understanding that there are different perspectives here, but the goal is to address a problem, and that while solutions maybe in the West may have worked, adapting them to a different context will take some adaptation. You can't just lifting a solution from London and just transplanting it into Uganda will probably not serve the people of Uganda well, because that does not respect the entrepreneurs on the ground, but it also may not be feasible given the context. So those are my takeaways from the wisdom that you have shared today. I really appreciate you saying that.
No, perfectly right. Perfectly right. And you have some of these contexts, so I think I'm just reiterating some of the things that we've discussed before.
And I hope that our listeners get some better insights into, or it puts them in a better place for those thinking of doing some work on the
Yeah.
continent, or just really in any emerging market really around the world.
Yes.
So speaking of emerging markets around the world, I know, Jacob, you've been attracted to the Asian continent for a variety of reasons, and I know you've done some consulting work. So tell us some of your experiences. First of all, which Asian countries you've been to? Um, the I don't know if we want to start an Asian version of Jollof Wars, so I'm not gonna ask you where your favorite meal in,
So
comes from, but just
no, that's simple.
sure, or you can share that too. Actually, I appreciate it if you can. But also
Yeah.
talk about, if you could talk about, your beyond your travel experiences, your favorite hobbies there. First, what took you to Asia, and
Mhm.
to the various countries that you visited, what those experiences were, and then maybe talk about how you can contrast your experience consulting in Asia to your experience pretty much consulting also in Uganda, and what the lessons from those experiences could be.
No, definitely. If I might ask the first question, I didn't get the first
Sure.
question.
Oh, so
You know,
yeah, just tell us which Asian countries you've been to, and where your favorite food was and what was it.
definitely. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, yeah. So I was fortunate enough to meet a professor. I have to kind of give a shout out to Professor Philip Kim. He's at Babson College, and my last but one semester at Babson for the MBA program, I um I actually, I mean, it was an idea that I've been thinking about, but it didn't come to fruition until I met Professor Philip Kim, who actually connected me. He had the database of the people that I could meet in these somewhat emerging markets, but most Asian markets that um, I felt were very key learning. They were very actionable, on the ground experiences that I could actually learn about this market, the countries, but also the people and their thought process of how they think about entrepreneurship, the philosophy of entrepreneurship, and also how they want to create systemic change from lessons learned in the past, but also how they are using what they're learning right now to impact the future. So, with Professor Philip Kim, we came up with this list of countries that I could travel to meet some of his networks to learn about what they're doing and how they think about their own country, but also as in a broader way, like Southeast Asia, the impact of Southeast Asia on the world. And with that, so I kind of the first place I went to was South Korea, and South Korea was the first point. Later, I left South Korea, went to Taiwan. Taiwan, that was like the first two countries. Then a few months later, I decided to go to Thailand, Vietnam, China, and back to South Korea. So I think those are how many countries? 4 or 5.
Many. This
Then
man
yeah,
is a well-traveled man.
yeah. So definitely. So I mean, and so the thing is, I've been to South Korea now 2 times, and it's just I've gotten to, and I've spent the longest time in that country. So uh, I had I had more time to test their food just to get them.
What was your favorite thing to eat in South Korea?
So I mean, it's hard to choose because they have the Korean barbecue, which is just like, um, I mean, just barbecue, but just like the meat and the sauce that they use is just it's just extraordinary. I mean, the bibimbap, which is like a mixture of vegetables with rice,
Hmm.
it's just amazing. One they have this very, I mean, because I was, I was also cautious on how much spending I had to
Right.
spend. One of the very affordable uh, food they have is more like a side dish. It's not like a main dish, but it's called taboki, and it's just I don't know how to describe. It's just really nice. You have like the cheese taboki, and if you have that with soju is like a popular Korean
Hmm.
drink. It's a very good combination. So taboki is actually one of like very affordable, but also like very good intro
Did you
into.
learn to make it? Oh,
No,
come
no.
on.
I mean, No, those things they're not easy to come by in terms of like just trying to follow the rest. No, it's just it looks simple. I think it will not be hard, but I've not
So
tried
if
it
I
yet.
want to try Taboke, I have to now go to Korea because I can't count on you to make it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's
All right.
fair. That's fair,
I
to be
will plan
honest.
to visit Korea then. But
Yeah,
so you did
exactly.
Jacob, you did some consulting work in Korea. Um, what was that experience like? And
So I mean,
what industry did you work in, or what industry did you work with? And yeah, can you tell us about that experience?
yeah, sure. So this what happened was that I worked with some Korean students to do consulting in
Mm-hmm.
Vietnam. So and there was a um, so there was some Korean support in building the consulting uh, strategy that I did in Vietnam with some of my colleagues from Vietnam from Korea, and so Vietnam was actually where I did some consult like we worked with several companies
Okay.
in Vietnam. Those Vietnam Post. Vietnam Post was one of the companies that requested. They had some. They were trying to um, reach out to networks in the suburbs, in the sorry, in the rural areas, and they're trying to now kind of build um, platforms that will provide access to those rural areas, right? Like something that is more tech
Mm-hmm.
based, um, something that can really penetrate some of those markets. So that was one of the main clients for this project that we're working on. There were also other there was Asia Foundation as well, and there was this local incubator in Vietnam that worked with women entrepreneurs and provided a space. I mean, they work with both men and women, but women was kind of the the market that could provide the highest value,
Real.
and that was something they're trying to focus on. It was based in um, the International Trade Foreign University, which is based in Vietnam. Very great school. So it's known for entrepreneurship as well.
I just want to point out really quickly your point about the viability of investing in women. That's a common theme we're seeing also as we look across the African continents. And so it's a
Exactly.
basically for any women out there with any visionary business ideas, solutions. uh, this is we want you to feel empowered and seek the resources because there's a lot of opportunity, and there's evidence to show that women who are given opportunity in business do excel and generate, pretty sustainable, remarkable returns. And so, just putting that out there and encouraging. I think that's interesting to see those trends in different markets, and
Yeah.
that just underscores the need to invest in women. Okay, sorry, Jacob. I just couldn't wait to put that
No,
out there.
no. I mean, that's a very great point, and thanks for even just bringing that out there. I think it's very critical for how we think about the future and who will be the main. I think women will definitely lead the way in kind of the entrepreneurial ventures that we develop as well as
Hmm.
investments that need to be channeled to them. So they definitely is something that it was worth addressing. I mean, going back to the experience of working with Korean colleagues in Vietnam, um, and this was just this last summer in 2019. One thing about Koreans and the workaholics, they get they can work they can work 24/7. Um, I think when they set their mind on something, um, it's just really impressive. We had a bunch of, I think, about 15 students from Korea, and they just put in the work, um, and just like the culture of you know um, thinking about how do we get things done is something that's ingrained in how they think about entrepreneurship, and also how they think about solving challenges. So I think that was something that was very obvious upfront, and that was something that I mean, not to say Africans are not hardworking or the African entrepreneurs are not hardworking. It's just from how um, um, they just saw challenges or something like they had to address them, and they had to address them very swiftly in a very coordinated way. It's they work more in groups, and that's something that is very visible. They can really work together to get something done. So that's really outstanding. And I mean, from a very macro level, it's all about Korea is kind of, I think, considered one of the most innovative countries in the world right now. So they have this back end, the back of their minds, they have that idea that they can actually innovate and can actually be very entrepreneurial and creative at the same time. So that adds on to like that macro thing of, yes, we can actually go solve problems because we have this national identity of being in the innovators of the world. So adding on to that, it was you could actually see that support, but also that community. There's a very strong bond within Koreans to actually be the front bearers when they're actually addressing problems or trying to address any entrepreneur projects. Which so it made the consulting easier for me because it was a very very coordinated effort.
That's pretty insightful, and there are definitely, again, lessons to be learned, or from that example. I think
Yes.
one thing I have learned is that building teams, and not just any team, but good teams, allows the team to leverage each person's skills and strengths so that you can address the problem again. But sometimes if you don't have a good team, also you can't. Teams allow you to hold members accountable, and when you don't have a good team, there will not be a lot of accountability, and sometimes that can be a burden. But it seems like that was not the case in with your experience in Vietnam. So that's awesome. Which makes me think, for any ideas that folks want to bring, any entrepreneurs in any other emerging markets, especially in on the African continent, it may be worth taking some time. It will be worth taking some time to select a very good team that you can also trust, and that's going to hold you accountable, not necessarily agree with all of your ideas, but to hold you accountable and to push you to meet the goals for which the team was convened. So that's something I've learned from you sharing your experience in Vietnam, but across Asia in general. We're approaching the hour mark, and so I just wanted to ask final question ask you one final question, Jacob. What's coming up for you in the near future? I know you're wrapping up your studies at Babson, and no pressure at all. This is an interesting time globally regarding the pandemic, but also that's always a very nerve-wracking question to ask any student who's graduating. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what ideas do you have? And they do not have to be near term. Like, are you looking, not necessarily what you're looking to do this summer, but just over the next year or so, what are some things that you're considering? Whether they're concrete plans or not doesn't really matter. What thoughts do you have?
I mean, that question, I mean, you have to address it, whether you like it or not, right? It's coming. I think some of these things are inevitable. We have to think about kind of what we aspire to. And as you clearly said, I mean, the pandemic has changed this kind of this. I mean, it's changed everything. So I think for me, I'm trying as much as possible, and something that I really hope that I'll be able to kind of condition myself, but also put myself in a situation where I try new things. I mean, this podcast is one of the things that I see as a way that we can share information, knowledge, interact with people, build value in some way, and actually create change that is safer. I mean, based on the lack of social distancing, but I'm trying to open up to different challenges and also opportunities that I can be able to apply some of the skill sets that I've learned in this program and the MBA program that will still achieve the same goal to some degree, but also maybe hopefully even reach out to more people. So Yeah, so I'm looking at different options. I've been trying out podcasting, and you've been very, very good friend to kind of experiment on this journey. Trying to do online consulting. So different ways to just think about how can I do kind of create quality content or quality work while also being as valuable as I can be to impact the communities I'm really fascinated or interested in, and alongside help people that might really need some of what I've learned in school, but also the experiences I've had. So, I mean, I know it sounds very open-ended, but I think we're also in a very
That's
open-ended
right.
world right
That's
now.
right. That's absolutely right. So again, I apologize. I apologize for putting you on the spot, but
Yes.
you're a brilliant guy, and it's always a pleasure to hear what ideas you have, and what visions you have for yourself, for the continent, because I know that you're very well invested in emerging markets, and with your work with through one of your initiatives that we didn't actually talk about on this podcast, Jamani Inclusive.
Yeah.
So we might have to bring you back on this podcast to talk about your work. Ladies and gentlemen, Jacob has a vast array of experiences, and so as you can clearly tell, one episode is just not enough to encapsulate those experiences. But we'll surely bring Jacob back for another episode. Jacob's is a great friend, incredible friend, and to me, a big brother. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with him and to always learn from him, especially in a setting like this, to share his professional experiences. I hope that you've gained some insight into his work across the continent of Africa, but also even outside of Africa, and have learned from his perspective, having grown up on the continent, but also stepping away and looking at it from outside of Africa. But this it's been a great pleasure having you, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Thank you so much. Your questions were really spot on, and it's a great opportunity to share what I've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.